Obviously, great feelings of anxiety, which are shared by so many people in this city and in this nation tonight. Just to add what Brian was telling us about the dump trucks earlier tonight, they are moving in through here. There are hundreds of them. They were banked up. They were lined up all day today. They are going in empty, and they are coming out with debris. We are told they are taking that debris to barges where it is being handed over to the FBI, where they will sift through that debris looking for evidence. Aaron.
John, thank you. John Voss down in the ground zero area, a little 4 or 5 blocks back from it, weekend's call.
And Jeff Greenfield has just dropped by to share some of his thoughts on what the president is facing at this moment and what the country will have to endure in the weeks to come.
We were thinking about the president, what he was doing today, and you think back to last year's election, peace and prosperity seemed a fact of nature. We all said there are no big issues on the table. What real issues could a new president have to deal with? Now we know, and a question arises, how have past presidents dealt with crises, and how have those crises defined their presidencies? Political benefit. But when President Johnson escalated the war in Vietnam, after an alleged attack on U.S. naval vessels, the resulting firestorm helped drive him into retirement.
When it comes to patriotism,
Richard Nixon had Middle America with him on the war in Vietnam. It was the Watergate scandal, of course, that sunk him.
If Iran should release the hostages,
Jimmy Carter's political defeat in 1980 was sealed by his failure to get American hostages out of Iran. And here's an instructive irony.
Allied air forces began an attack on military targets in Iraq.
President Bush's success in the Gulf War pushed his approval ratings past 90%.
all right.
But the resulting high oil prices and shaken consumer confidence led to a brief but politically fatal recession.
Their legacy must be our lives.
President Clinton, he never looked as presidential as when he led the nation in mourning after the Oklahoma City bombing. But maybe the past doesn't really tell us all that much. I mean, presidents have led us into war, but we've known who the enemy was and what the war was about. We've had presidents console us with losses, but never a loss this enormous and this threatening. So I think what we really can say, much as we look to history for guidance, this president, 9 months into his term, is facing a challenge no other president has ever faced before.
What are your thoughts about what the president had to say today when he toured the area surrounding the Pentagon?
I think everything this president has done and said is what he has to do and say, and it is going to get enormous support from all parts of the political spectrum. The question is not what he says, but what happens in the weeks and months ahead, because this is not a patient nation. And what my point is that this country doesn't always support a president if he doesn't deliver. The piece we didn't see is that, Franklin Roosevelt, when he got us into World War II after Pearl Harbor, everybody supported him, but that war was prosecuted successfully. And so the question now is, what happens when people say, you've got to do something, we've got to strike, and then people say, do we really know who to strike at? I think this is an enormous challenge, more complicated maybe than any president's ever faced.
And it strikes me that in an interview I did earlier today with Secretary of State Colin Powell, he is preparing the nation for a long assault. He said this is not going to be over in a week or two. This is going to require the combined efforts of the United States and what he called the world neighborhood or world community.
And look at what happens beyond even military action. Look at what happened just a few moments ago. The nervousness that runs through this country where anybody can make a phone call and evacuate at the Empire State Building and Penn Station. What happens when the commercial airlines get back into work and somebody calls in a bomb case? How much more seriously will we take it? How much more disruption? And that's what I mean by the uniqueness of this challenge. This president is facing not simply the need to take military action, not simply an enormous loss of life, but the whole possibility of a ripple of disruption throughout this country. I can't think of a historical parallel to it.
Jeff, thanks.
Okay.
Thank you, Jeff. Around the city of New York tonight, there are literally hundreds of people, perhaps thousands of people in hospitals. They have been taken there over mostly early yesterday. They're being treated from injuries that are as simple as scrapes and bruises and as serious as you can imagine, as life-threatening as you can imagine. Medical correspondent today, Elizabeth Cohen, visited one of them, and here is her report.
Andrew Zucker started his day Tuesday on the 86th floor of the South Tower of the World Trade Center. After the first explosion, the one in the North Tower, his wife called.
And he said, I'm okay, I'll call you back, and he hung up.
But then his building blew up.
If I know Andrew, he stopped to help somebody, and I don't even want to think about what happened, and I don't know what happened to him, but he's just not here.
But thinks she must, because like many people who stood in line to find out about their missing loved ones, Erica says she still thinks her husband may still be alive. So while Erica worked the phones Wednesday, her sister, Naomi Konovich, and family friend Susan Feldman went out on a search, one hospital at a time, starting at New York University Medical Center, where there were no answers.
Bellevue, I think, is on like 27th. It's only like 3 or 4 more blocks down.
After Bellevue, on to Beekman Hospital. No one had seen him there either.
Someone told us actually to go over to the medical examiner's office.
They told Naomi to gather dental records and hair samples in case they'd have to identify his body.
They don't have lists of people who were found dead. They don't have anything.
Late in the day, after buying a mask to keep out the dust circulating after all the explosions, she checked yet more public offices. Still, no one had heard of Andrew Zucker.
They said there were a couple of John Does in the hospital. We're hoping to find that maybe one of them is him.
In the end, a frustrated Naomi distributed flyers to the media.
He's about 6'1", heavy set with the big shoulders and a big chest.
While her sister kept up the round of calls to the hospitals, to the morgue.
If you do see him or you're with him, just tell him we all love him and just to hold in there. And we just want him to come home. We need him to come home.
Elizabeth Cohen, CNN, New York.
An odd or end, if you will. One of our colleagues who lives over in Brooklyn woke up this morning and looked out in his backyard, and scattered about were pieces. We're working off that camera. There we go. Here, hang on to that for me.
Want me to hold that for you?
Yeah, would you please? Thank you. Pieces of scraps of paper that had blown. You can see the edges of them. I hope you can see it at least. The edges of them singed. This comes from Cantor Fitzgerald, one of the investment firms in the World Trade Center. Obviously, when the building blew and the paper flew, it scattered all over the area. It crossed the water and in and over to Brooklyn and into our friend and colleague's backyard today. And I wonder how many people around the area woke up to something like this.
Well, for the first time, we are being told that New Yorkers as far away as 4 miles from here are smelling the stinging smoke that continues to come from what is left of the World Trade Center. I think you made it clear, Aaron, that area continues to be illuminated tonight. You'll just find that over my right shoulder, where rescue workers are still on duty.
When I was down there earlier today, the smell is indescribable, and it is unforgettable. I mean, I hope never again to have it. It's absolutely awful, and I wouldn't even know how to begin to tell you what it smells like. It smells like nothing I've ever experienced, but I know I'll never forget it.
Right now, we'd like to share with you some of the thoughts of Bruce Morton as he focuses in on how the nation will have to continue to come to grips with the magnitude of what has been handed us.
The House will be in order.
Congress went back to work.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
If these cars were parked blocks away from what was once the World Trade Center complex, or if they've actually been pulled out from the wreckage?
Paul, I didn't quite think I understood all of your question, but yes, these cars were pulled from very close to ground zero. And if you look at the image that we've first given you, it certainly looks like the images of a war zone. And in fact, that's what it must have been. Indeed, what you were looking at is a car that was pulled out from somewhere close to what was the World Trade Center, someplace very close to the Twin Towers, just a few blocks south of where we are right now, just a few blocks south. in what was Ground Zero. This car here, we believe, was probably a police car, because if you can look at the front dashboard, you can see the radio display at the computer terminal, or what was once a computer terminal, and a computer keyboard. We also found some police reports in the car. So it's unclear, of course, whether this car was a vehicle that had been stationed there, or whether this person or the crew that was driving this car were responding to the scene. If you look just down past here, you'll see two cars. And from this vantage point, you can get a really good sense, I think, of the impact, the profound impact of this blast. Unrecognizable, other than the fact that you can see what was once an engine completely covered in debris and soot, and what was once a wheel. Obviously, these were steel radio belted wheels, and now what is left are just the stringy wires around the rim of this thing. You know, as I've been spending some time down on this street, which has become a pretty important artery, we've been seeing rescue workers coming in and out, some of the new rescue workers who are relieving the folks who have been working all night, some of them arm in arm, hands over each other's shoulders, clearly getting very emotional about this. A lot of pedestrians have walked by this street, and they stop whenever they see these vehicles, which were obviously pulled so that the rescue workers can continue doing their very good work. And they look at these vehicles with complete incredulity. I see many of them standing there, sometimes 2 and 3 at a time, friends or family who obviously live in the neighborhood, looking at these cars, gazing, and I think these cars, seeing the shell of these cars is giving a lot of people, at least the people who live here, and maybe some of our viewers at home, just a very true sense of what the impact must have been like, and what it must have been like to be one of the many thousands of people who were there when the impact first occurred. Just down here we have a car that's in slightly better shape, but tells a story in its own way. Maybe it was a few blocks farther away, farther north, slightly further away from the impact. And as you can see on its front window, the word scrawled W-A-R, war, because I suppose that's what it feels like. Paula?
Boy, I'll tell you, it's going to take a while for anybody to digest the images you're seeing now. Michael, I know it is very difficult to get any information out of rescue workers now. Obviously, everybody's working so hard to try to perhaps even rescue folks at this time. Have you been given any information from paramedics about what is going on at Ground Zero?
Well, what we've heard right now is that people are working tirelessly. They're working in very long shifts, that they're getting very emotionally involved in what they're finding. I'm trying not to be gruesome about this, but to be very accurate, frankly, about it. They're finding more body parts than they're actually finding bodies. And some of the rescue workers, obviously getting very emotionally attached to this particular task, say that they're concerned that they may not be, there are some people who may never be identified, whose entire bodies may never be found. We've also talked to somebody who's been intimately involved in the rescue and search effort, who tells us that they found what they believe to be at least one of the wheels of one of the planes that crashed into the Twin Towers 4 blocks away from where the Twin Towers were. So again, that gives you a sense of what the impact was like. And there's no telling what else we may find within this perimeter. It's interesting, the rescue workers are working right inside what you would call Ground Zero, or the heart of the explosion and the blast. But when you talk to more rescue workers and you talk to police officers and other local authorities here, they will tell you that the damage that was sustained by that blast spread many blocks beyond that. And I think just telling you that the wheel of one of the planes, what they believe to be one of the planes, being found blocks away, gives you some sense of that.
Michael, can you tell us if the smoke seems any thicker down there now? From our platform here, it appears as though, and I know the winds have shifted a little bit, that the plume is even larger than an hour ago.
Right. Well, I can tell you this much. It may be because I'm getting used to this, which is probably bad news, but it doesn't quite feel the way that it felt even just 30 minutes ago. It's constantly changing. I'm going to ask William if you could just swing by and look up here. We are underneath essentially what has become a very recognizable plume of smoke. You can see this from just about any place in Manhattan right now. In fact, you can see it from New Jersey. You can see it from parts of the other boroughs outside of Manhattan, from Brooklyn to Queens. And what I can tell you is that it's been very interesting. Again, one of the many vehicles that pass us as we've been standing here for the past hour or so. What I can tell you is that it doesn't feel as severe as it was. It smelled very much like you were standing in the middle of the embers of a bonfire. No longer smells that way. The colors of this cloud seem to change by the minute. Just moments ago, it was a very thick black, and now it looks like a white, sort of grayish, as if you're almost flying through the clouds in the air. Paula?
All right, thank you, Michael. Put that mask on. I know that the health workers down there are advising all of you that are in that close to put the mask on. Before we go back to Atlanta, I wanted to share something with you that some of you might find disturbing. Because the winds have shifted, some of the wreckage is blowing to parts of Manhattan, even a couple of miles away from here. Peter Stiles is a correspondent of ours. He lives, we are told, about 2.5 miles from here. I wanted to share with you some of the paperwork that ended up blowing into his yard. You will see this sheet is just simple notes, maybe with some phone numbers. This is an order slip from Cantor Fitzgerald, which is a bond company that was housed in one of the 3 buildings that collapsed. This particular piece of paper probably will sicken many of you. It is a sheet explaining health coverage from employees, explaining that early retirees' health coverage cannot be terminated. And this last sheet I'm going to share with you that blew up into the yard of Peter Stiles is an actual list of a list of participants in a deferred vested benefit plan, actually listing 10 or 11 people who had vested interests at this point, even describing the value of those benefits. Once again, people all over Manhattan are reporting smelling smoke stronger than they have smelled over the last 48 hours. The schools are indeed open today, all public schools that is at least, and the majority of the parochial schools. And once again, we are told that the stock exchanges may open as early as tomorrow. If they don't open tomorrow, they will open on Monday. The city is working very hard to clear some of the arteries moving south of here. You can't even get down to Wall Street now because many of these streets are being used as a staging area for the rescue efforts. So Leon, that's what I've got for now, and you know, I don't know what your reaction was to this paperwork, but I know that it got an awful lot of people here.
Boy, I can tell you my immediate reaction was a bit of a twinge in the gut to see something like that. It really puts a human face on what happened just more than 48 hours ago. Thanks, Paula. Well, Paula mentioned how difficult travel is around New York. We know travel around the country has been nearly impossible for many. What you're looking at now is a live picture that we have set up from the Department of Transportation, and we're expecting any minute now the Secretary of Transportation, Norm Mineta, is going to be coming out and announcing that there will be a reopening of the airports across the country under certain guidelines and certain conditions. And we'll get more information on that when that press conference gets underway, and we'll get there live. Well, actually, we may end up having to stick around for a couple of minutes. Nothing? No, apparently we do not have a press conference right now. We were going to be having another guest, but that's going to have to be delayed for just a moment. Darren, over to you.
That's how it happens when we have live television. We will get to that guest. Very important topic to talk about. How do we talk to our kids about what has taken place, and how do you keep them from being scared? Someone who knows a lot about that, father of 2, also one of our best correspondents here at CNN. Marty Savage is in New York City. May is way up there and brings us more coverage from there. Martin.
You hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. We can't see you, though. There you are.
All right, there we are. Well, let me tell you exactly what is going on right now, and there is an intensive search and rescue effort that is underway. Specifically, though, we are hearing reports it is focusing on an individual, a survivor, who is believed to be trapped in the sub-basement underneath of Building 1. We know more details about this, but I am right now hesitant to tell them to you because I don't want to give families out there, thousands of families, any false hope. But at this particular point, we know that this person has been communicating with authorities over a cell phone, was heard most recently, we were told, by a rescuer at about 4:30 this morning. Now, the problem is there's tons and tons of steel trapped over this specific position, and the effort right now is to try to lift that steel out of the way. We saw a short while ago an army of iron workers that have come in. They have joined the throng of rescuers on site here, and they are literally cutting away piece by piece the pieces that made up the Twin Towers. Now, we've been showing you the automobiles, we've been showing you the pieces of paper, but quite frankly, if you want the most graphic depiction of what has transpired on the tragedy, walk to the end of the block down here. Twin 110-story buildings now have been reduced to a pile of rubble that stands about 100 feet tall. That is the clearest example of the devastation that has been visited on New York City here. And as the workers try to go in and do their job there, many of them now are putting on rappelling harnesses, they are using ropes, because they are literally attaching themselves to any strong points that they can find, because that pile is so loose and so capable of shifting. So they use these harnesses, attach themselves, and clamber down much like mountain climbers. They do not believe that any survivors are now going to be found above ground. They have been certain.
Marty, I'm sorry, we're going to have to interrupt you. We'll get back to you in a moment. Want to take our viewers to Pennsylvania. This is an FBI news conference, the latest on United Airlines Flight 93.
As we've talked about yesterday and we'll continue to talk about until it's resolved, the other priority that we're working on is the black box, the voice recorder. As of right now, it has not been located. We're confident that we're going to keep working on it, and we will account for it. And as I said, that is the other investigative, that's the investigative priority right now, is to locate that. We're still doing the grid searches. We're working on covering the entire crime scene, and we'll go wherever the evidence leads us. There has been a lot of questions regarding the flight path. There's an awful lot of information out there. We have determined that the flight was heading in an eastern direction, and that's coming from the NTSB. Beyond that, anything else would be speculative on our part, and we really don't want to go any further than that, but we will confirm that the plane was heading in an easterly direction. That's coming from the NTSB. To give you a little bit of an idea of how we're operating up there, one of the questions to us has been how many agencies are up there and who are they? One of the things, we have tremendous amount of agencies that are up there with personnel, and it fluctuates on a daily basis depending on the needs of that day. What we've been doing is who's ever up there, they have their own meetings and their own objectives, whatever the organization is, whether it be the Red Cross trying to get enough food for the workers and for you, all the way to any leads that are being generated from the state police or the FBI or any other federal law enforcement. All the different agencies are up there trying to work and do the job what they're here for. They're meeting, all the heads of the different agencies that are up for that particular day meet twice. They meet at 9 a.m. and they meet at 2 p.m. And basically they go around the room and everybody talks about what it is that they've accomplished and what it is that they're working on. And then at that point, the people who need to know have a good idea of how things are working, how things are funneling, so we have a clue what's going on and people know what's happening here on this site. Now that's only for this site. And as you're well aware, the FBI alone has over 4,000 agents working not only nationwide but worldwide trying to track down any leads. It's an awful lot of information. Anything of an investigative nature that will be released out of Washington, D.C., most likely from either the Attorney General or the President or the Director of the FBI. We're focused here on what's going on here on a day-to-day basis. That's what we hope to convey to you with our press conferences that we're going to have twice daily. And that's what we're focusing on. There's been a lot of questions regarding the crater itself. According to people who have been involved in these investigations, such as the NTSB and the state police, when the plane goes in on the ground, there's a tendency obviously for an awful lot of dirt to be moved and dust. As you can tell from the roads
We've
around
been
here,
listening in on an FBI news conference, the latest on the crash of United Airlines Flight 93. That's the one that was on its way from Newark to San Francisco when it crashed on Tuesday morning. Still have not recovered the black box yet. They're still hopeful they will find it. The grid process goes on, and they also had more information that the NTSB saying that they do know at this point that that plane was headed in an easterly direction when it crashed. More information on that just ahead. Right now, here's Leon.
Well, actually, I would like to, I hate to do this over the air, but I must ask the producers. I just now see that Transportation Secretary Norman Mineta is now at the podium. We want to hear what he has to say right now.
In order to restore our security to the fullest extent possible, we exercise the necessary precautions while assessing our nation's transportation systems. Now I am pleased to announce some good news for travelers, for our economy, and for the restoration of America's freedom of mobility. Effective 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time today, our national airspace system will reopen to commercial aviation. At this moment, the FAA reports that we have airports starting to reopen across the country. Now, this decision was made after a series of meetings throughout the day, yesterday, and late into Wednesday night with the White House and other cabinet officials, Federal Aviation Administrator Jane Garvey and her great team, aviation industry leaders, as well as intelligence and law enforcement representatives. I must caution everyone that a system as diverse and complex as ours cannot be brought up instantly. And so we will be reopening airports, and airlines will be resuming their flights as they meet the new security measures that we are now imposing. Additional airports will be opened only after they meet the new stringent security measures. Anyone planning on flying today, or not even today, but henceforth,
I only recommend that you contact the number that I gave you. People are en route. As we've been told that people are en route. That's coming from United Airlines, and they are supposed to go to that location, the Seven Springs Resort location, and that would be your best bet on where to get information on the families.
Is anybody coordinating access to the families? Otherwise, it's going to be 50 media representatives.
That is going to be coordinated through United Airlines.
I apologize for the switch in the audio there of that transmission we were getting from the Department of Transportation. Unfortunately, that was not under our control. We did get the top of the report there that Transportation Secretary Norman Mineta has announced that the skies over America will begin opening as of 11 a.m. Eastern Time. The process of reopening is going to be a gradual one because he says that with a system as diverse and as broad as the one that exists here in the U.S., it can't be done instantaneously. As a matter of fact, I think we now have the audio problem straightened up. Let's go back to that report.
Will take place before passengers are allowed to board any aircraft. We have discontinued off-airport check-in and curbside check-in at the airport. All passengers will be required to go to the ticket counters to check in. We must reserve boarding areas for passengers only, and only ticketed passengers will be allowed to proceed past airport screeners. And all vehicles near airport terminals will be monitored more closely. We experienced an unprecedented assault on our commercial aviation system. And in times such as these, we will use all available resources to ensure the safety of our travelers. Agents from the Department of Justice and from the Department of Treasury will be deployed to airports across the country. The added presence of these officers will augment our existing heightened security procedures serving as a visible reminder of our strong commitment to protect the safety of the American people and the traveling public. Again, I strongly urge all passengers to allow plenty of time to deal with the heightened security procedures and also to exercise patience with airport and airline employees and security personnel. Finally, let me say this. From this day forward, we are operating with tightened security. In the weeks and months ahead, we will do all that we can to ensure that the safety of the American aviation system is in place. We will not allow this enemy to win the war by restricting our freedom of mobility. I wish again to express my hope that all Americans will heed the President's call to keep the victims and their families in our prayers and our thoughts as we go about the task of recovering and rebuilding. I will now take questions.
What is the situation now with general aviation, with business aviation, and the cargo carriers?
First of all, the cargo carriers are not being differentiated from the commercial passenger airliners. There are certain requirements being put on them in terms of security and safety measures, but they are back in the air again effective 11 a.m. On private or general aviation, rather, I will have a little more on that subject later this day. But right now, this is a announcement only as it relates to the commercial and cargo airline.
As of 11 a.m., you can't go out and hop in your Cessna and take off?
No, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Secretary,
Mr. Secretary, some say...
We've been listening to the Transportation Secretary, Norman Mineta, make the announcement that things in the skies over America will be getting back to normal sometime fairly soon. He announced that the airports and airlines will begin the process of going back to regular service. He did announce, though, a number of restrictions that passengers should expect to now have to endure. Number one, then the off-airport and curbside check-in will no longer be allowed. The boarding areas at all airports will only be accessible for ticketed passengers only. And all vehicles that are near terminals are going to be monitored more closely. And he's also advising that passengers allow for plenty of extra time now for these added security measures. And he's also asking for extra patience, which is no doubt going to be needed. We'll continue to monitor that and bring you any other new developments that come out on that angle. But we want to move on and get to an angle of this that we've been trying to get to for some time now. And that is, what do you do with your children or the children in your family that may be trying?
You've been watching our sister network, CNN USA, for continuing coverage of America under attack. I'm Zane Vergy at the CNN Center. We're going to break away now to bring you some of the international reaction to what's been happening in the United States. But development in Germany, where police in Hamburg are working on that city's connection to the attacks on the U.S. World Trade Center and the Pentagon. Bettina Lucia is in Berlin, and she joins us now with details. Bettina.
Zane, this is all part of the international manhunt to try to find out who is behind the terror attacks in the United States. Germany's top prosecutor has started an investigation against an alleged terror cell in Germany, in the northern German harbor town of Hamburg. They're looking for one man with Arabic background and several others. This man is accused of having founded in January of this year an Islamist fundamentalist terror group. And the link that is being investigated and studied, whether there is a link, is that 3 of the passengers on 2 planes that crashed into the World Trade Center and in Pennsylvania, according to German police, have been living in Hamburg, were registered at a technical university in Hamburg as students studying electronics, and those are the angles that are being investigated. The police have raided several apartments overnight. They have checked out 8 apartments. They've searched conclusively 4 apartments. One man has been detained preliminarily. German police say he is an airport worker, but they refuse to identify him or even say what his nationality is. They also brought in one woman for information, for questioning. So German authorities working closely together with American authorities and trying to find out what international connections there are. Zane?
Bettina, is it clear how they got the lead?
They got the lead. The U.S. authorities checked out the passenger manifestos, as of course you've been reporting over the last several 36 hours. And they were trying to figure out where these people are and what international connections they have. And so they got in touch with the German authorities, and the German authorities went through their records and checked out where these people are. The students, if those are the same people, were leading regular lives. At least they were not known to police. They were registered with the authorities, and these apartments are still being investigated. The investigation, of course, is going on. German authorities are somewhat tight-lipped about it because they say at the moment they're just starting to find things. They found a certain degree, of course, of information. When we talked to the prosecutor's office a short while ago, they were still saying that as of yet they do not have leads that there was a link to Osama bin Laden.
When they're searching those apartments there, Bettina, what are investigators looking for?
Well, one of the apartments that they looked at is where 2 of these men who were also identified by name. 2 of these men are Mohammed Atta and Marwan al-Shehi, who apparently received flight training in Florida. So we've heard about 2 of these names before. What they were doing in these apartments, in this one apartment specifically, is looking for any kind of evidence. They had explosive experts in there and other experts. And what is important is that at least one of these men left Germany for the United States in May already, and the one apartment that has been searched has not been used since February. So there's still many, many questions of who these men were and what their links are. But again, the authorities here believe that a terrorist cell was founded here in January of this year, and they're looking for suspects.
Also, a man has been detained who worked at the airport there, and another woman brought in for questioning. Do you know how long they would be detained for?
No, the investigation will just simply continue. The German police in Hamburg, which is the lower level authority, they were doing the overnight investigations. They wanted to stress that, you know, they have to find out more about that man. They didn't want to identify him. They didn't want to say what nationality it was. They stressed that it was a provisional detainment. And at one point, one of the officials said they don't want that anybody who might, after all, not have anything to do with his attack would be named prematurely.
Bettina Lucia reporting to us from Berlin. We're going to take you now back to our sister network, CNN USA, where a conference call is expected between U.S. President George W. Bush and the mayor of New York, Rudolph Giuliani, as well as the governor. We take you now to Paula Zahn, who'll get us into that.
Conference call. We have every reason to believe we're going to be able to show you that. We're going to be able to eavesdrop in on that conversation, legally, of course, I might add. But as we wait for that call to get underway, I just want to quickly bring you up to date on what is going on in this part of the country. We have some pictures now of Kennedy Airport, which will show for you that they are opening up to limited service. And you just heard Transportation Director Mineta describing how travelers, if they choose to travel over the next couple of weeks, well, forever, I guess we're told, they will see increased security. That's not apparent from these pictures, but clearly the airports, in order to open up to this kind of service, have to put into effect some new security guidelines. Mr. Mineta mentioned that there will be no longer will there be any curbside check-in. Only ticketed passengers will be allowed through security. No knives of any kind will be allowed to be taken on board. In addition to that, there is going to be a much higher standard used for employing security personnel. In addition to this, we're just beginning to get a sense of the scale of the tragedy witnessed here in New York City. The mayor of New York City confirming that some 4,763 people are on the missing list. Some 94 bodies have been recovered so far, not all of those identified. Right now, I'm going to check in with Kelly Wallace, who is standing by at the White House. Kelly, we haven't heard much about what the president has been doing today. Can you fill us in on that?
Absolutely. Just like yourself, Paula, we are waiting. We know the president expected to make a telephone call. We were told to Mayor Giuliani, you adding more information there, that Governor Pataki will be joining that call. The president really to say that the full weight of the government is out there to help New York City, Pennsylvania, certainly the Pentagon, deal with search and rescue operations. We know, Paula, the president was in the Oval Office shortly after 7 a.m., getting his daily national security and intelligence briefings. He also, Paula, has been working the phones, continuing to build what this White House has been calling an international coalition against terrorism. He called the Prime Minister of Japan, the Prime Minister of Italy, Lord Robertson of NATO, and Crown Prince Abdullah of Saudi Arabia. Ari Fleischer, the president's spokesman, saying all four, expressing their condolences and sympathies to the American people, and also saying that all four stand united against terrorism. Paula, you've heard us. We've been reporting that the White House trying to build this sort of international consensus. Reporters pressing Ari Fleischer to say, what is the U.S. government asking of these countries? Is the U.S. asking for military assistance, economic assistance, to place sanctions against any country? When and if the U.S. retaliates, Fleischer would not respond, but he said it's more than rhetoric that the U.S. is asking for support from these countries. We also know, Paula, the president will be going to a local hospital in the Washington, D.C. area later this morning to visit with some of the families of the victims affected by, obviously, the plane crash at the Pentagon, and to thank the doctors and nurses who are helping the victims. And Paula, as you've been reporting, there was some interesting information.
You've been watching our sister network, CNN USA, for continuing coverage of America under attack.
We've gotten from the federal government, it's been tremendous. And for your words, you are right. Our nation is united as never before, and we will triumph over this evil with your leadership and your inspiration. And I also have to congratulate the mayor for the tremendous effort he has made. Mr. President, you would be proud of the leadership and the cooperation we've seen here. The city has taken the lead. Your people have been enormously supportive, and we're very grateful.
Well, thanks, George and Rudy. Thank you all. I know you've put in a request, and I've directed the Attorney General to expedite any payments of benefits for those fallen public safety officers to their families, any benefits to their families. And the Attorney General, as I understand, will be making a formal announcement of your request today. I've told Allbaugh anything it takes to help New York. I have been in touch with the Congress. They are expediting a supplemental. We've had great cooperation with members of the Congress in both political parties. So just keep in touch. I know you will. This isn't the first time we've talked, and I really appreciate the fact that you all are in charge. And I know the citizens of New York and the tri-state area, people of New Jersey and Connecticut, are appreciative as well.
Mr. President, the uniformed officers, the police, the fire, the emergency service officers, their families will really appreciate this. We're going to sustain a tremendous loss of our bravest and our best people. And the relief that you're now making available to the families, it's going to mean a lot to them. They're going to be able to think about the fact that their children are going to be taken care of, that they're going to be able to go to college, that they're going to be able to carry on. So I can't express to you how appreciative we are of your acting so swiftly. And also, on that terrible day when our city was being attacked, you were in immediate communication with us, Mr. President, and helped to secure the city. And the work you've done for us, we all eternally appreciate. You've been a terrific leader, and we're taking direction from you, and we're following your example. You've done a terrific job, Mr. President.
Thanks, Rudy, and thanks, George. Let me make it clear to you all, as my close friends, that my mindset is this. One, I'm weep and mourn with America. I'm going to a hospital right after this to comfort families. I wish I could comfort every single family whose lives have been affected. But make no mistake about it, my resolve is steady and strong about winning this war that has been declared on America. It's a new kind of war. I understand it's a new kind of war. And this government will adjust. And this government will call others to join us to make sure this act, these acts, the people who conducted these acts and those who harbor them are held accountable for their actions. Make no mistake. As we do so, I urge, I know I don't need to tell you all this, but our nation must be mindful that there are thousands of Arab Americans who live in New York City, love their flag just as much as the three of us do. We must be mindful that as we seek to win the war, that we treat Arab Americans and Muslims with the respect they deserve. I know that is your attitudes as well, certainly the attitude of this government, that we should not hold one who is a Muslim responsible for an act of terror. We will hold those who are responsible for the terrorist acts accountable and those who harbor them. You'll see, and I look forward to visiting with you in person tomorrow, about the resolve of this government. And so I thank you very much for your leadership on the ground. I wish I was visiting under better circumstances, but it will be a chance for all three of us to thank and hug and cry with the citizens of your good area.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. We really appreciate this very much.
Mr. President, we're looking forward to your visit. It will inspire us all, and we will be with you when the United States takes firm and appropriate action to those who conducted this evil.
Tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, you've just been able to hear the president talking to the two bloc leaders of New York, Governor Pataki, Rudy Giuliani, the president announcing, in fact, that after attending a prayer service at the National Cathedral tomorrow, he will head on to New York, where he plans to work, or actually try to make contact with the hundreds of rescue workers on duty. Here's the president again.
Yes, I would. If a family member asked whether they should fly, I'd say yes.
Mr. President, how close are you, sir, to finding out, to nailing down who is responsible for these acts? And what kind of international coalition are you trying to build? Is it similar to the one your father built for the Persian Gulf War?
I am, first let me condition the press this way. Any sources and methods of intelligence will remain guarded in secret. My administration will not talk about how we gather intelligence, if we gather intelligence, and what the intelligence says. That's for the protection of the American people. It is important as we battle this enemy, we conduct ourselves that way. Secondly, I've been on the phone this morning, just like I was yesterday, and will be on this afternoon on the phone with leaders from around the world who express their solidarity with this nation's intention to rout out and to whip terrorism. They understand, fully understand, that that an act of war was declared on the United States of America. They understand as well that that act could have easily been declared on them. These people can't stand freedom. They hate our values. They hate what America stands for. Many of the leaders understand it could have easily have happened to them. Secondly, they understand that unlike previous war, this enemy likes to hide. They heard my call loud and clear to those who feel like they can provide safe harbor for the terrorists, that we will hold them responsible as well. And they join me in understanding not only the concept of the enemy, that the enemy is a different type of enemy, They join me also in solidarity about holding those who fund them, who harbor them, who encourage them responsible for their activities. I'm pleased with the outpouring of support. Jiang Zemin, Vladimir Putin, had a great visit this morning with His Royal Highness Prince Abdullah of Saudi Arabia. I will continue to stay on the phone. And there is universal support for the American people, sadness in their voice, but understanding that we have just seen the first war of the 21st century. And there's universal approval of the statements I have made, and I am confident there will be universal approval of the actions this government takes. Yeah, Stretch.
Mr. President, if this is a different kind of war, it might require perhaps a different kind of coalition. Many people believe that for a real war on terrorism to work, you'll need cooperation from governments that haven't necessarily done so in the past, specifically Pakistan and Afghanistan. Have you made any progress on that front?
I would refer you to the statements that the Pakistani leader gave about his, I don't have the exact words in front of me, but his willingness to work with the United States, and I appreciated that statement. And now we'll just find out what that means, won't we? We will give the Pakistani government a chance to cooperate and to participate as we hunt down those people who committed this unbelievable, despicable act on America.
Mr. President, how confident are you that Osama bin Laden is behind these attacks? Do you know what his whereabouts are? And secondly, what kind of support are you looking for from Congress in terms of your willingness to act?
We are, we will not discuss intelligence matters, how we gather intelligence, and what we know. Secondly, I am about anybody. When our government acts, you'll be informed. Secondly, we had a great meeting yesterday here in the cabinet room with leadership of the House and the Senate. I was touched by their response, their encouragement, and their willingness to work together. And I would be very pleased to see a strong resolution come out of Congress supporting the administration and what we intend to do, and we're working closely with Congress. Secondly, progress is being made on a supplemental. I thought that was very swift action, and I'm most appreciative again of Senator Daschle and Representative Gephardt, as well as my Republican colleagues, for really showing solidarity again and uniting the nation. Now's the time for the country to be united. And, you know, through the tears of sadness, I see an opportunity. You know, make no mistake about it, this nation is sad. But we're also tough and resolute. And now's an opportunity to do generations a favor by coming together and whipping terrorism, hunting it down, finding it, and holding them accountable. The nation must understand this is now the focus of my administration. We will be very much engaged in domestic policy, of course. I look forward to working with Congress on a variety of issues. But now that war has been declared on us, we will lead the world to victory. To victory.
Mr. President, what is your understanding of the threat to Air Force One, and do you believe that the terrorists attempted to assassinate you, sir?
I will not discuss the intelligence that our country has gathered.
Do you believe they tried to assassinate you?
I believe I took the, I know I took the appropriate actions as the Commander-in-Chief to be in a position to be able to make the decisions necessary for our government to handle the crisis. You didn't hear the end of the phone call with the mayor and George Pataki, both of whom thanked me for the fact that we were immediately on the phone with them from Air Force One, and our government responded quickly.
How do you feel knowing you're under personal threat?
Could you give us a sense as to what kind of prayers you are thinking and where your heart is for yourself as you work on that?
I think about myself right now. I think about the families, the children. I'm a loving guy, and I'm also someone, however, who's got a job to do, and I intend to do it. And this is a terrible moment, but this country will not relent until we have saved ourselves and others from the terrible tragedy that came upon America.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
A very emotional President Bush addressing reporters there. We just saw a number of live events with the president. He was talking to reporters just after he had a conference call with Mayor Giuliani and Governor Pataki, both of New York City and of the state of New York. The president, before getting what appeared to be very choked up, repeating a lot of statements that he said over the last couple days, once again reiterating that he considers this an act of war, this act on America, saying there is no safe harbor for the terrorists who have carried this out, nor no safe harbor for the countries that could be supporting or harboring the terrorists. And he talked of support coming from other countries around the world, mentioning Russia, Saudi Arabia, and also, I think, making allusion to Jordan as well. Let's bring in our Kelly Wallace, who we were talking with before we went ahead and listened to this conference call, and also we're listening to the talk with reporters. Kelly, question for you. One of the reporters was asking a lot about the Pakistani government and the level of support. If our viewers were with us earlier today, you saw leaders of Pakistan come out and hold a news conference and make a statement. Why is there a question at this point how much support the government of Pakistan is offering, and why is it important to America to have that support?
Well, it's important, Darren, because Pakistan, and then it's just the United Arab Emirates and also Saudi Arabia, only the three countries that recognize the Taliban as the ruling government of Afghanistan. Pakistan viewed as really the closest ally to Afghanistan, and obviously the president in that news conference saying that he will not talk about any intelligence matters, will not talk about the investigation. Privately, though, U.S. officials saying that the evidence is definitely starting to point to the network of Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden is believed to be in Afghanistan, and it is believed that the Taliban has been providing Osama bin Laden safe haven. So when you have Pakistan, General Musharraf, the military ruler of Pakistan, coming out, making a statement saying that Pakistan stands united with the U.S. government in combating terrorism, if that is true, and as you heard the president, he obviously seemed gratified by that statement, although a little skeptical, of course, wanting to see exactly what the general means by what he says. But if that is true, and if the Pakistani government will stand with the U.S. and this sort of international coalition that this White House is trying to build, that would be significant because, again, a lot of ifs here, Darren, but if it is determined that the network of Osama bin Laden is involved, if it is determined that the Taliban has been providing safe haven to Osama bin Laden, then certainly Afghanistan more isolated than before if the Pakistanis step with the U.S. and the world community and not with Afghanistan.
And Kelly, it sounds like the president once again saying